Hello people, I am TheRealComicBookGamer, and today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite little Nightwing stories called Nightwing The Target. I say little because it's not some big storyline or anything like that. It's just a nice little 48-page one-shot that was written by Chuck Dixon, and the art is done by Scott McDaniel. Nightwing fans know who they are because they were the original guys on the Nightwing book when Nightwing got his solo book, and they did a fantastic job. And this was one of the many stories that they did together, and I really enjoyed it, so I decided, you know what, let's talk about it, because while it's not the most grand or their magnum opus or anything like that, it is a nice, fun story, and I think we need more of that considering how what we have with Nightwing right now, what we have with Rick Grayson, to where stuff like this would be much more appreciated. So without further ado, let's get into it. So this story opens up with a Nightwing being a cop, because this was during that time when Dick Grayson, in his off time when he wasn't Nightwing, was a police officer. And he joined to be a police officer because Bloodhaven is a garbage place. When Chuck Dixon was writing Nightwing, Bloodhaven was supposed to be the ugly sister to Gotham. It was supposed to be even worse than Gotham. And everyone knows how terrible Gotham is, but Bloodhaven was supposed to be a place that was even worse. So that's surprising, but that's how Chuck Dixon wrote it. And the force there, the police force, was just corrupt. The officials were corrupt. The media was corrupt. Everyone was bought and paid for by some criminal organization, just everyone. So Dick Grayson figured he'd join there, he'd do some good as a cop, he could also get more information that he could get being a cop than he could doing anything else. And so he decided he would join in and try to, fight it from the inside as well as being Nightwing. So he's a cop. One day he's out on his beat, he's doing his thing, and then he sees these cops are just chasing these kids, just these teenagers, and they chase him into looks like these sewers, this underground place. Nightwing goes down there, well, not Nightwing, but Dick Grayson as a police officer goes down there, and he sees that they're just destroying these kids, just beating the crap out of them. They beat them to death. Nightwing stops them. Well, Dick Grayson stops them. Sorry, I keep saying Nightwing, but at this point, he's not in his Nightwing uniform. He's just Dick Grayson. He stops them. He says, "Hey, stop. Someone call an ambulance. You guys clearly are using too much force. They're not even putting up a fight. They're not resisting. What are you doing?" And then he gets clubbed in the back of the head, and he wakes up in a hospital bed, and he's like, "Well, I don't remember much of what happened, but a detective is talking to him that's working the case, and the detective is like, "Hey, yeah, those 4 cops said that you killed that kid. So out of all the kids that were getting beaten, one of them died, it looked like, and so he was framed for it. Those 4 cops that were down there beating those kids, they were framed Dick Grayson. All 4 of them had the same testimony saying that Dick Grayson killed those kids. So Dick Grayson is now being looked at and is the main candidate, but they don't have him yet. So they tell him everything and how he's basically screwed. A dirty guy comes in and tells him, "Hey, just take the plea deal and you'll serve the minimum sentence for manslaughter. As long as you say that, hey, yeah, what they said was right. As long as you just corroborate the story that those 4 dirty cops said, then you'll be good." But Dick Grayson, of course, he's a hero. He's not going to do that. So he gets back on his feet. He goes to his apartment because, right now it hasn't gone to court yet, and so he's not, arrested yet. It's just 4 cops saying that he did that. So he goes back to his apartment and he meets Batman there. He called Batman as soon as this happened because he knew that people would be going to search his apartment, and so this way Batman was able to go there and make sure that all his Nightwing stuff was hidden, so that way people wouldn't search his apartment and be like, "Oh wow, there's a Nightwing costume right here. It looks like Dick Grayson was Nightwing." Bruce and Dick have a chat. Bruce talks to him about how he was not happy with Dick being a cop in the first place. He just didn't think it was a good idea, especially in a place like Bloodhaven where they're all just corrupt. But Dick tells him basically, "Hey, this is what you taught me to do. This is what I'm supposed to do, and I'm doing it. So, that you got to deal with it." And then Bruce asks him if he can clear himself, if he has a way of getting himself out of this mess. And Dick's like, "Yeah." And we see that in Dick's inner monologue. He's kind of happy that Bruce believes him and isn't like, "Did you do it?" or doubting him. Bruce is like, "Yeah, I raised this kid. I know he didn't just kill some random kids and when he was out on his beat as a cop. I know Dick Grayson wouldn't do that." To where I feel like Tom King Batman would probably be like doubting Dick Grayson or something. So it's nice to see a Batman that believes in Dick Grayson. So they just, then Batman leaves after that. But actually, before he leaves, he tells Dick Grayson, he's like, "Hey, whatever you do, don't be Nightwing, because Nightwing cannot be caught up in all this." And Dick agrees. So Dick assumes a new persona. He assumes the persona of the Target. The reason he can't be Nightwing is because Nightwing has no reason to be associated with this. Because if you look at it from the outside, it's just, okay, a dirty cop, Dick Grayson, because that's what it looks like, killed some innocent kids, and 4 good cops corroborated the story saying that he killed the kids. And so if this was Nightwing's point of view and he had nothing to do with Dick Grayson, it would look like, oh, open and shut case, no reason for me to get involved. So Nightwing can't get involved, because if he does, then people start making the connections and things could get bad and people could figure out that he's Dick Grayson. So he cannot be Nightwing. So he goes around as the Target. The Target is this guy that's kind of got like shoulder pads and like a black mask and a target on his chest, sort of like a target that you'd shoot at a shooting range, as well as he goes around with police batons instead of the screamer sticks that he normally uses as Nightwing. So he goes around, and here we get to see him do some detective work, which is cool. I like seeing Nightwing on the case solving stuff. So he goes around, he figures some things out. He starts remembering some things from the night before. He remembers that before he went down into that into the sort of like sewer under Bloodhaven, that he saw two guys that the cops were chasing, but the cops ended up losing them and chasing someone else. So he ends up through various ways figuring out who those two guys are. He finds them. He goes and sees that those guys are actually still alive and they're fine. And then he's able to connect who Miller, who's like the main dirty cop, is working for. And he goes and he talks to that guy, and he has a cool conversation with him where it's like pretty badass. He's the Target, and he goes to his heroin operation. He's like, hey, I need to talk to you about something. And so he goes and he starts talking to him about the dirty cop, and of course the drug dealer's not going to tell him at first, but then he had lit the whole place. Well, he covered the whole place in gasoline, his whole heroin operation. He's like, hey, if you don't tell me about this cop, then I'm just going to light your whole business on fire. So of course the guy tells him, Nightwing, well, the Target lights the whole place on fire anyways, because, you know, it's still heroin. He's not going to honor something with that guy. So he burns the whole place up, and then Miller shows up, the dirty cop. Him and the guy he was working for, the heroin dealer, they start talking it out. They're about to shoot each other. Then Dick Grayson comes in and stops them, because he's thinking about it, and he's like, I could just let them shoot each other, but that would be Miller's kind of justice and not the correct justice. So he takes them all out, and they're able to go and capture the two guys that Miller was originally going after, that he meant to beat to death, but he then beat different kids to death instead. And through that, they're able to take those kids, well, not those kids, but the guys that they meant to beat to death, they took them and they gave their stories and talked about how they saw the whole thing and how Dick Grayson actually tried to stop those cops from killing those guys, but got knocked out by them and they killed those kids. So in the end, it's a happy day, and the Target stopped everything, and it was just a cool little story. And it's another persona that Nightwing has had, that it would have been cool to see a throwback to the Target instead of Rick Grayson, who's a guy that smears gasoline on his, or not, whatever it is he smears on his face. He just smears that black stuff on his face and then goes around with some rope. And, man, it would have been so cool to see, like, a throwback to the Target or something, because the costume's kind of cool. Although it does look very, like, the costume itself doesn't look Nightwing-esque too much besides the pants, but the fact that he has the two batons is a little bit of a giveaway. Guy running around on a rooftop, Nightwing suddenly gone. But yeah, it was a good story. I liked it. You guys should definitely read it if you have not. It's a good detective story, and it's cool seeing Dick Grayson have to, you know, cover himself, have to go out of his way, not be Nightwing to solve his problems. But yeah, in the end of the day, he was able to clear himself by having those guys that witnessed everything testify, and those cops get put away. And yeah, it's just a good story. I miss good Nightwing stories because they're not too good right now. Although Dan Jurgens is doing his best with what's going on. The Talon storyline is interesting. It's just I hate Rick Grayson so much, to where seeing this Dick Grayson, this determined Dick Grayson that goes to clear his name, is cool, and I miss this Dick Grayson. Sadly, we don't get to see a whole lot of him anymore. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please let me know with a like and a comment, and subscribe if you want to see more of these videos. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you guys later.
Yeah. On my grind all day, gonna make $1 million, son, that someday. You know I'm in the building when I write this way. Put me in the ground when I bite this game,